¿Qué está pasando, familia de Liga Combate? Today, we have a very, very special episode. And yes, you are listening correctly. I am speaking English. Why? Because today I am joined by one part of the hosting duo of Morning Combat and pretty much one of my favorite analysts out there, Luke Thomas. How you doing, Luke? Welcome to Liga Combate.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Que pena. My Spanish is in progress, but it's not good enough to have um, a helpful conversation. I'm not quite at that level yet. But you have asked, like when I do get to that level, to come back to Liga Combate, and I promise I will come back and give an interview in Spanish.
You heard it, people. Once he's fluent in Spanish, we're gonna have Luke Thomas cursing in Spanish. Of course, that's what we do. We curse. Luke, right off the bat. Haney, Loma, a controversial decision. A lot of people were unhappy. A lot of people are using the big R word that I don't like to use often because it gets confused constantly. Robbery. Was it actually a robbery? Was it a close fight? Were the judges favoring? This is what people are claiming. This is what's blowing my mind. People are claiming that the judges favored the younger guy because there's more of an upside with him. Do you share that opinion? And what was your take with the fight?
Here's why that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yes, Devin Haney. Devin Haney is the younger man. Lomachenko in that fight, 35 years of age. Devin Haney, just 24, 11 years his junior. But the problem with that theory is the boxing industry wanted the young guy to win. The boxing industry, this particular fight, it was promoted by Top Rank. This was Devin Haney's last fight on his deal. He's now a free agent. So why the hell would Bob Arum pay for a guy who is potentially going to walk and go to any of his top rivals? They didn't have a bad relationship, but Canelo doesn't have a bad relationship with DAZN or Showtime, but you'll see him go back and forth. So that's just the way the industry works. And so when a guy leaves, you don't want to just, crush him when he's on the way out the door, but they don't want to set him up for a DAZN pay-per-view either. So that theory doesn't make a lot of sense. In terms of the robbery, I mean, here's the problem, I think, right? This is where we get with MMA too. Can I find 7 rounds for Devin Haney? Yes, I can find 7 rounds for Devin Haney. I can find those. It's nuts to argue that you can't really do that. I think is just disingenuous, especially with Lomachenko admitting he took the 12th off. That's not doing him any favors either. Yeah. But I will say this for the people who are upset about it. Number one, the 11th round for Lomachenko was the most dominant round by any fighter in the entire fight. There's no Haney equivalent of round 11.
He landed 2 punches, Devin Haney, right?
Right, 2-20. 2-20. Right? I mean, that's just insane. And, people don't want to make too much of numbers, but you got to remember, these dudes don't get hit very cleanly very often. To land 20 on Devin Haney, that's a lot. And the other point I wanted to make here is that I understand the arithmetic. Haney won a bunch of rounds up front. Lomachenko was much better later, but it looked like in the end, obviously by the way they went, a little bit too little too late. However, it just feels to me like when you play that arithmetic game, you're not really playing a better question of okay, right, maybe I can say that those early rounds were his, but you tell me who looked better for the most important periods of that fight. And it just feels like Lomachenko is that guy. Lomachenko was the one who I think, smaller man, older man, kind of outperformed in certain ways expectations. He was the betting underdog heading in, and the scoring just doesn't reflect that.
Mm-hmm. He was pushing the pace. And after the fight, I was just trying to do a short analysis. I'm like, what is the best way to describe what I just witnessed? And in order for me not to mention the word robbery, and this is what I said, the fight was close. The difference was that the rounds that Lomachenko won were very clearly Lomachenko rounds. While the rounds that Haney won, you could also probably make an argument for Lomachenko to win those as well. And that's why people are so upset. Plus, Devin Haney's not a big puncher. That's something for some reason in MMA. It's also it translates to MMA as well. It's if you don't have knockout power, you got to be really, really flashy for people to like you, right?
Yeah, that's true. And the what's interesting is there's now this conversation, right? So it's okay, some of these guys who we always wanted to see fight in this weight class, they're starting to fight. This was a big one. We just saw, 135, the same weight class, Tank versus Ryan Garcia. And And there's a famous picture. I don't know if you'll be able to put it in later, but if you can, it'd be cool. I don't know who took it. The top ranked photographer, and it's a
Oh,
picture of Shakur Stevenson just eyeball. Dude, he's looking at Devin Haney
yeah,
like he's a meal, like he's
yeah.
about to just feast on this guy. And I want to
Hmm.
point out, like Shakur Stevenson, in my view, is the best guy in his weight class.
I
He
agree.
also doesn't have pop, but
Hmm.
that's why either of those guys versus Tank Davis, who's got just nuclear power, to me, that's both of those fights will be high stakes contests, so it could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I share that sentiment with Shakur as well. Like the thing with Shakur is like when his career started, he was very similar to Devin Haney in the fact that he was not very entertaining. He was very pleased with just boxing you for however rounds he was fighting you and then winning a decision. Lately, he's pushing the pace way more, and he might not get you out there, but he'll beat the fuck out of you, and he'll
Mm-hmm.
make it look very very nice.
He's, listen, I'm 43. I don't know what the fuck kids say anymore. But back when I was in my 20s, we would say that Shakur's got a style where he just stunts on you. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like he doesn't have huge pop, but he makes it look like you're a lesser in the way
yeah.
in which he dissects people. And so for that reason, those two guys fighting, or again, Tank in the equation, also makes it kind of fun as well.
Yeah, I remember I got to cover the Jamel Herrick fight with Shakur here in Atlanta. And that was the first time when I realized I was like, this kid is special. Like this kid is
Mm-hmm.
probably up there in the Mayweather level, early stages of his career. And I know people might blow out and go crazy when I say that, but once you see him perform, the dominance, and once you consider Jamel Herring's career, like he was no pushover, and he put a beating on Jamel.
Yeah.
That's when I realized I was like, oh, we have a new dog in town.
Yeah, I know. He absolutely demolished him. And then the other part too is like people forget, like, yeah, there's a whole other component to Floyd where he mastered the promotional side. Fair play to him, or if you like that or didn't, but he made money doing that. But folks forget, like the early half of his career, dude, he fought hammers. He fought hammers. And Shakur is like desperate for the smoke.
Yeah,
Hopefully, this new era where guys are kind of fighting each other a little bit more, hopefully it extends to him because I think, I don't, I mean, listen, it's so early, who can say? But I
yeah.
don't think the comparisons to Mayweather, at least in terms of like being a generational talent, I don't think that's in any way inappropriate.
Yeah, one thing I like about this generation, there's like a gap, right? There was the Roberto Duran era, all those Julio Cesar, they will fight anyone, any weight, anytime, right? Then we got to this Mayweather era with the negotiations, Cotto, rehydration clauses. But this new generation, the Ryan Garcias, the Gervonta Davis, the Shakur, the Devin Haney, they are willing to make the fight happen. Like we've seen Devin Haney jump around with promoters, managing his career in a very strategic way, right? In a way that serves his purpose, not the promotional ones. But I'm excited because if there was a time for big fights to happen, it is now. And at least this new generation is showing interest in these big fights happening. Now, Devin Haney might go up to a 140. I know a lot of people don't mention him. I am Puerto Rican. I have to. Subriel Matias is right there. I
Yeah,
think
dude,
he's
he's
going
a
to be
hammer.
a problem to deal with for a lot of people, including Regis Prograis. So I'm excited for the future, Luke.
Yeah, Subriel Matias is going to be fun because dude just has, I mean, dynamite power, absolutely accepting of risk, clever too, but obviously just really in your face kind of guy with very dominant power. He's a player in that division. Again, Regis Prograis is a player in that division. There's a couple guys. I mean, we're not even getting to half of the guys at 140. It's a
Yeah,
lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, let's see. Let's hope it can continue. Right, we're on this streak where you even heard Devin Haney speak about it pre-fight. He was saying, Mayweather kind of messed it up where maybe he's good enough to go, undefeated, but everyone else kind of copying him wasn't, and they missed out on a lot of opportunities, and fights just didn't get made. Rather, opportunities for the fans, I should say. And hopefully, this new era is a little bit different. So long may it rain. Let's see. Let's see it continue.
I agree. I agree. One last topic on the Haney Loma fight. There's one thing that people are talking about, and I thought it was a very interesting topic. One of the things people are pointing out with Haney was in the first half of the fight, his body work, constant body work, great body work. But leading to this fight, Haney was talking about how they're pushing a little bit more. They're trying to put that pop in those punches, right? But Lomachenko's better half was the second. is Haney's power just non-existent, or is it just that Lomachenko is just from another planet?
Ooh. Well, he definitely got off the body work later. I think in part by some of the angles and mobility that Lomachenko was showing. Just didn't. His entries got a little bit smoother as well. He just got him a little bit craftier, more pressure. Right, that was the other part too. Like when Haney's up against the ropes, man, good lord, like Lomachenko was dicing him up. So yeah, man. Haney is going to be the guy where if he fights a tune-up fight for whatever reason, he could knock a guy like that out. But I just, just thinking about other guys who he could fight, he would have to land on them in a really sustained way, like really like stick it to him. So the thing is, he can land and he can land to make it count. Like, just think about this. Al Bernstein is a Showtime commentator, and he's been noting up until this actual fight, he was noticing this year that the judges were not giving credit to guys who went to the body. Here they do. They finally give credit to. I mean, yeah, you have to say it was very respectable body work that he was doing.
Mm-hmm. He did.
I just feel like he's got the kind of power that will score with the judges, that will make guys think twice, that will be enough to be noticeable, but never truly dangerous. Whereas Tank Davis is almost the opposite. Like, he doesn't have very noticeable offense other than when he really scores a big counter shot or when he really lands a heavy punch. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Luke, moving on to the second topic. This is something I talk a lot in Spanish, and I'm very happy to have you here with me because this topic in Spanish never does well. And I have very few people to talk it with, and it's UFC revenue. John Nash recently released a Substack where he detailed how much money the UFC made last year, if I'm not mistaken, and they're literally breaking the bank, yet we're still having a lot of issues when it comes to negotiations, fighter pay, benefits long term. What's your take on all this?
So before I answer that question, you can actually help me with something. I would love to know the answer to this.
Yeah.
Tell me why your audiences, the Spanish-speaking audiences, why are they, in your best assessment, why are they unreceptive to this message?
I started to notice that they've become fans of the brand, not the sport. When you mention something that benefits the sport in general, but might not benefit the UFC, that's when you start noticing people starting getting aggressive and against it. It's like, whoa, who are you you contradict Dana? Have you seen the empire he's built? Like, the sport is where it is due to him. It's like, okay, we can give him credit. I agree. He's a very influential person on MMA and what it has become, but that does not mean that I'm just going to look the other way when we have fighters like Tim Sylvia with a rod that's almost exposed and he has no way of paying for it. Like, I have a saying, like, I love this sport, but I respect the athletes so much. Like, every Saturday, they're putting their health at stake for my entertainment. And yes, I am not okay with a fighter like potentially dying. He probably makes $12,000. No, that is not okay with me, specifically when the promotion is making this kind of money. If the promotion was a small one, well, we understand. We tend to have a little bit more leeway. It's like, okay, they're starting up, they're making decent pay. But when you compare UFC salaries to the rest of the promotion, and then you look at each of the promotion's revenue and the UFC, that's when shit starts getting kind of sketchy for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is not a very difficult argument to understand. And not to say that you haven't tried and done a good job. Some people just really don't want to hear, but people want to make it out to be it's anti this brand or it's anti that brand. And it's not. We live in a world, forget MMA for just a second. How many great telecom options do you have when you want to get your phone? I mean, you got a few. You got T-Mobile, you got Verizon, you got AT&T, but you don't have a whole lot. The government doesn't really crack down on that. How many times have you noticed when you want to go fly someplace, you don't really have a ton of options? Like, people say when that person got pulled out of their seat in the Delta flight, everyone's going to boycott Delta. How are you going to boycott Delta if that's the dominant carrier out of the place where you do most of your business or travel? You're just not going to. We live in an era of economic concentration. This is simply no different. Remember, they've been looked into twice by the not the Department of Justice. Yes, but there's been 2 times there's been antitrust inquiries, forget the lawsuit, into this brand by the federal government to make sure everything was on the up and up. Now, of course, they came to, at those times, different conclusions, but just understand something here. You're asking about the financials for 2022. The UFC in 2022 made $387 million in profit. Now understand what that means. That's full. Everything they owe is already paid out. That's just extra. That's all take home, non-taxable. Boom. Right. That's the profit that they made. Right. They're going to take home $387 million. For reference sake, this is almost certainly, we don't have access to Pride books from 2003, but even then it wouldn't really matter because I can't imagine it could come close. This is almost without any issue the most that any promoter has ever made in a single year in the history of fight sports. Let me put it to you another way. The way to understand this is if you took up every MMA promotion and every boxing promotion from 2022 and combined them, the UFC still made more. Out of every dollar that is generated in the MMA industry, the UFC makes 90% of it. Here is why we are worried about this. We are not saying in any way whatsoever that the UFC is not entitled to make a lot of money, and good money, in fact. They have. I lived in a world, I remember this distinctly when Pride was but much bigger than UFC. I have watched them shift that to where we are today. They competed and they won and they did well. But the truth is this. The reality is it's a monopoly, and as long as that is the case, they are not going to face nearly the same kind of competitive pressures to make a product more consumer or even fighter friendly, depending on how you want to look at that, because of the way the industry is structured. That's the problem. It's going to the airport and you only have one airline, and maybe you like that one, but you just can see the problem when you've only really got one to do business with. That's the issue.
Yeah. Just like me, for example, my fans went crazy when I told them what I pay each time there is a pay-per-view so that I can create the content they watched. When I told them, it's like, yeah, it's around $90 every time there's un evento numerado, right? So they were like, oh, I only pay $5. Oh, I get it free on TV. It's like, yeah, no,
Right.
it doesn't work the same way here in the US. So when I'm paying $90, I want the fighters to get paid. I want them to make a little bit more off that revenue. I'm not asking them, hey, give them all your money. No, the UFC is entitled, just like you said, because they've grown the brand so much. They've helped grow the sport to where it is right now. You guys are entitled because that was all your work. But how about we throw some money to the guys actually getting the sports, putting on the shows, doing the great fights that are exciting the people all over the world? That is the only thing. And I think another hurdle on that question you asked me earlier was maybe the fact that the US operates in such a different way from the rest of Latin America. And this is something I learned when I started creating content, because being Puerto Rican, I've always been very, very influenced by American culture. I've always consumed everything in English. When I started doing this content in Spanish, I was really lost because I was trying to adapt the English to Spanish, and it just doesn't work that way. The clicks doesn't seem, the titles are not the same. People don't click on the same stuff. So it's been a adjustment process for me. So I think it's the same thing. People don't understand the politics on how it works here, how the NFL, the MLB, the NBA, the way they're structures and how they split the revenue with the players. And people just think it's like, no, you are a communist. No, I'm not trying to take money away from them. I'm just trying to make it fair for everyone here.
Well, also just think of it this way, right? Let's pitch it this way. Like 387 million left over. And by the way, like I want you to these are all publicly available documents. Like this is what the UFC released to the federal regulators who look into this when you have a publicly traded company, right? So listen to this. Their net income profits are from 119 million in 2015 to 177 million in 2020, then 272 million in 2022 to now 1 year later 387 million. They're going to cross 400 million this year, probably substantially. There's going to be a year, probably not too far from now, where they're going to be at $500 million a year. I just want to point out something. The idea that there's not money to pay Jon Jones what he wanted originally 3 years ago, which was Deontay Wilder money, or Francis Ngannou what he wanted. Now, his situation is a little more complex, but when he was under UFC and then you had Jon Jones asking for Deontay Wilder money, which folks want to know, it's about $20 million a fight. Yeah. They had it. It was there.
They could have made this They could have made this fight happen. They could have made this fight happen and answer all the questions.
Yes, dude, they can make almost all of these fights happen. This is just see the situation for what it is. They did really well, but this is an unregulated industry by the federal government. And so it has grown to a spot where now it's like, dude, what else is there but this? And is that a healthy situation? Your mileage may vary.
Yeah. And I love how Dana White has managed to like just learn over the years and dealing with the media how he's able to literally shift the blame. It could be all his, he could be at fault, and he's always found a way to manage like people's opinion and point it at someone. Like right now, people were really pointing at Francis like, yes, he's the reason why the fight never happened. I'm just like, dude, have you seen the interviews of Francis constantly saying, I'll fight anyone, anywhere, anytime. Just give me a date, give me a date. And now all of a sudden, Francis was scared. Francis didn't want to fight. Francis was pricing himself out. I'm just like, after looking at these numbers, I'm just like, whoop. The difference is who's going to look at the numbers? What are the chances that a big portion of the fan base actually look? Slim. Slim to
Right.
none. Am I right?
Slim. Even though a lot of it's publicly available, but yes.
Yeah.
But
It's
also just
great.
something else I want to point out because I don't know if you think about on the boxing side who are the most insane boxing fans, and the British are amazing and everything else, but like Hispanic fight fans, Mexican fight fans, Puerto Rican fight fans, these are like rock ribbed fight fans, and people are fight fans in these communities through generations. But it's not clear to me that that's happening with MMA. There's a lot of people get this like emotional attachment to it for several years, and then it begins to wane and then fall apart. I bring this all up to say, dude, I've been watching for MMA for quite some time, and I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah.
I have seen guys get old who did this sport. Shit is not pretty. We have barely even scratched the surface of what is coming with regard to that. I just want folks to know, like, if you get like super into the sport and then you leave and you forget to ask questions about what happens afterwards, well, some of us stick around. We have to cover it, dude. Some of these guys at the end of the rope, these guys are risking insane and incurring, I should say, more than just
They're
risking,
broken.
incurring.
They
Yeah,
are
dude,
broken.
the shoulders are banged up, the backs, the knees, the necks, the brain
Fused
damage.
backs,
It's absurd.
discs. Like people get social security for a bad disc, and these guys will have like 3 or 4 fused. I'm just like, yo, what kind of RoboCop shit is that? You know what I'm saying?
Seriously. So the point being is, like, again, in your line of work, in my line of work, in our line of work, it wouldn't be good for us to like hurt the UFC in some kind of way that people imagine we're trying to do. That's not
Yeah.
what we're after. What we're after is, dude, these guys are killing it. They're fucking killing it. Surely there is more to go around. Surely.
I completely agree. Luke, I have 2 more questions, and now I have just under like 4 minutes with you. One question that came up today. Henry Cejudo said, John Jones does not need Francis Ngannou to claim being the greatest of all time. Something that I agree. But does he get to claim he's the best heavyweight in the UFC history without fighting Francis?
No. Right. So GSP, for example, who has 2 belts. Now, he only has that one win over Bisping, and then he bounced. But like, no one is sort of saying like, well, because he is sort of who he is and he won a belt up a weight class, would he be considered for the best middleweight ever? And I realize that's not your question, but we would end up in the same kind of place via a different route by thinking of it in these ways. So no, like, what's his heavyweight resume? His heavyweight resume is gone. Like, that's a nice win. That's not really a heavyweight resume. What makes the broader resume is that we all know we took 3 years off, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I don't need to say it all over again, but no, he would not be. You would have to do much, much more. I'm a big believer, like, when we have these conversations, for example, about like who's the best featherweight of all time, and we know what the reality is. Max stopped Aldo twice. Volk beat Max 3 times. Volk beat Aldo once, so it's got to be Volk. But then, and that's not necessarily the wrong answer in this particular circumstance. All I'm trying to say is the real way to look at that is, what did they do in that weight class? How many title defenses? How many ranked guys? How long were they there? And for that reason, Jose Aldo's a little bit underrated. But to answer your question, no, John Jones would not be in that circumstance.
Perfect. I completely agree. The resume needs to back up the claim, and the resume will be separated. If we're talking about heavyweight GOAT, okay, let's look at your heavyweight resume. Cyril Gane, okay, yeah, that's not enough. That's simply not enough. I agree he is the greatest of all time up until this day, but he does not get to claim being the heavyweight GOAT today with the kind of resume he has. Last question. Well, yeah, pretty much. Last question. Luke, every time I invite someone over, I like to ask this question because I always like to show a different side of people. What is something that Luke Thomas enjoys that people have no idea? Do not mention Cannibal Corpse. Do not mention all the stuff we already know. Something that people have no idea. You like singing in the
Um,
shower, dancing the Macarena while you go to Colombia. Something like that, Luke. Give me something.
that's so funny. Because I've basically lived on camera for the last
Yeah.
15 years,
I'm
or not
starting to
even,
suffer
but
the same symptoms right now. People know
So here's
everything
what I
about
would say. Like, this is partly just an aging thing. Like, as I get older, it was funny. I remember one time, so this must have been a lot before my kid was born. So, yeah. So let's say roughly it was, yeah. So let's say 10 years ago. So I was 33 at the time. I went on a boat trip on this beach in Virginia called Chincoteague. It's you may have heard of it only in this way. It's one of the few places in America where they actually have living wild horses. And they live in this territory. They're protected, and it's a whole thing. But you have wild horses, like it's cool as shit. Anyway, I took this boat tour one time, and it was me and my wife, and then it was this other couple. And this other couple, this dude was like, in his 60s, and he bonded with my wife because my wife is from Colombia, which I know you know. And because he was saying like, "Oh, the bird watching in Colombia is amazing," and I'm like, "Dude, who
yeah.
gives a fuck about bird watching? Like, I don't who could fucking possibly care?" And dude, I'm at 43, and then the last time I was in Colombia, I remember just sitting at a park bench and then looking at all these birds and then walking around all these like different
It
walkabouts. I was
got
like,
to
dude,
you.
I was like, bro, the birds in Colombia are legit. That guy was telling the fucking truth. I couldn't believe it. I was like, yo, that's how you know you're getting old as balls, man. Because I
Yeah.
would have never in a million years cared about fucking, look at the beak on this one and the block. Yeah, dude, it's the older I get, I find birds fascinating, bro.
Dude,
Fascinating.
it is amazing. I was telling my friends the other day, it's like ever since I had my daughter, like I can see the shift in my perspective all around. I used to hate that guy. I used to hate that guy that criticized all the music. Your music sucks. My music was better. Now I'm that dude. Every time a new
Yeah.
reggaeton artist comes out and all these kids are blowing up, it's like, oh yeah. I'm like, listen, the only reason he's big is because we didn't have that when I was a kid. We didn't have Spotify. We had to burn the CDs. He sucks. So I completely understand because I am turning into the old cranky dude that constantly criticizes new music, constantly criticizes new pop culture, although I've always hated pop culture, but that's another topic. But yeah, man, I'm really, really thankful that you accepted the invitation. It is an honor. I want you to know that it is an honor. When I started creating content, way before I started, I used to follow you. You were the person I always looked up to, and the fact that you're here sharing this space with me means the fucking world to me, man.
No, well, think nothing of it. Próxima vez en español. So, I'll be a little bit better. I'll be
Señor.
ready to rock. I'll be ready to rock. And dude, I'm always happy to support creators in the space. I appreciate your support. I think it's vital that we have people like you doing what you do for Spanish speaking audiences, English audiences alike, but certainly that as well. And happy to come on anytime. And also, I went to high school. Well, I don't want to out where you live, but
Hey, you
basically
can.
we
People
were.
know.
Oh, they do. They know. Okay. Yeah, I went to Marietta High School. So I went to the old one, not the new. The one that you might know of is the newer one. I went to the one that was downtown, and then
Okay.
years after I graduated, they shifted it. But I went to Marietta High School, so I actually lived in Valdosta, Georgia. I lived in Nashville, Georgia, and I lived in Marietta, Georgia. I moved all
Nice.
around, so yeah, I know
Yeah, yeah,
Georgia
yeah.
well. Unfortunately,
I've been here 7 years. Like the space. One thing I enjoy that I didn't get to enjoy back home in Puerto Rico is the fact that I can see stuff here. I was able to attend my first UFC event. I've been able to cover
Wow.
PFL, boxing fights. Back home, we only get boxing and local boxing. You see, we rarely get big fights. So the fact that I'm here, I'm able to go everywhere. Soccer, I covered Atlanta United for like 3 or 4 years. So, dude, it's been a dream living here. So I
Wait,
don't see
last thing.
myself.
Where in Puerto Rico are you from?
The South. It's called Guayanilla, very small
Uh,
town next to Ponce, a big capital. We're known for turnovers. That's what we're known for. We have mean seafood turnovers. And please do not
okay.
let anyone from the north fuck this up. It is empanadilla. Empanadilla. If someone offers you a pastelillo, feel free to smack them and then give me a call. We'll fix it. You won't get in trouble, Luke. Don't let them, because Even though Puerto Rico is very small, people from different areas have different words. And turnover in the north is called different, even though we have another pastry for the name that they use, which I'm not going to mention because it's ludicrous. But yes, I am from Guayanilla, a very, very small town. But yeah, south of Puerto Rico,
Well,
man.
Puerto Rico's got something going right because I actually, my wife and I started our dating life in Puerto Rico. So
Shit,
um,
I'm
we were
telling you,
both
man.
working at the same place and we didn't really know each other. And then we hit it off in Puerto Rico. And now I've been married for almost 15 years. We got a kid. So here you go.
There's some magic in Puerto Rico. Well, Luke, thank you. I won't take any more of your time. People, if you guys, by any weird chance, have not heard of Morning Combat, give them a follow. They do great work. Great work. Morning Combat YouTube channel. You can also listen to them in podcasts. And yeah, in a couple years, we'll probably have Luke here cursing in Spanish, people. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Luke, and catch you the next one, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.